right? That was the whole thing.
Good morning. Welcome to our online worship service for the First Unitarian Society of Ithaca, a community that reaches for connection even while distanced, digs deep for inspiration in uncertain times, and strives to engage with a world characterized at once by the beauty of spring, the threat of illness, and the tragedy of pervasive injustice. My name is Magdalene Lindeberg, and I'm your celebration associate today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, with a special welcome to our other congregations in our cluster, new friends in the Ithaca community, and anyone who is joining us for the first time today. Amid all the uncertainty, we are certain that we need one another. Please check your email, our Facebook page, and our website for more information on how to create connections amidst this experience of physical distancing. If you would like to receive weekly updates describing opportunities for engagement, please email a request to office@uuithaca.org. A few brief announcements. First, there will be a conversation about this year's budget with our treasurer, Jennifer Stride Mullen, today and next Sunday at 12:15 after coffee hour. Next Sunday, June 7th, is our annual flower communion. Reverend Margaret invites you to send a photo of flowers before next Thursday to be included in the service. And on June 10th at 6:30 p.m., we will be holding a Vespers service to reflect on the losses we are grieving during this time. I now invite you to take a moment and think of someone who is special to you. Today, I want to express thanks for my colleagues at work and the good spirits and energy they brought to our collective efforts to finish out the semester. Who are you thankful for?
Here we gather, coming in from the garden and the creek, entering into this place that is both familiar and new, a place that offers the space to wonder, to be curious, to explore. Here to this room where we now work and learn and play and eat and dream and worry and live nearly our entire lives. Here, separately but together, we gather, carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, the continued injustices that repeat themselves over and over like a broken record, the grief and the losses that burden us with their heaviness and pain. Here we arrive carrying with us our fears and our worry in a world that asks much from us, while also offering to some of us the privilege to tune it all out. Here we are. Here we are invited to be with our thoughts, our hopes, our dreams, our imaginings of a world made better by our diligence and courage and fierce, fierce love. Here in this religious community, we gather, far apart from one another, but close at heart, united not by our shared space, but by our shared yearning for a world that is big enough and strong enough to keep every one of us safe and fed and healthy and loved. United by our capacity for that loving and nourishing and wellness making and creation of safer and more just spaces. Here, we have a lot that is asked of us. A lot that calls us beyond our selfish shells to live a life of beloved community, of radical welcome, of love that is not mushy and weak, but fierce and brave in the face of hatred and fear. Today, we have yet another chance to try again. Whoever you are, whoever you love, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Here you belong. The flaming chalice is the symbol of mystics and heretics, artists and activists, reformers and refugees, and Unitarian Universalists everywhere. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. And now we will join our voices through the distance with our opening hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Hi, friends. I want to revisit our chalice lighting words from today. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. These are the chalice lighting words that our youngest and several other of our religious exploration classes say each Sunday during their time together. Each Sunday, the RE volunteers say these words with our children and then move on to helping our children figure out how to live these words. Each Sunday, the RE volunteers help our children learn how to live our 7 principles. They talk with our children about the inherent worth and dignity of every person. They talk with our children about justice, equity, and compassion. Each Sunday, our RE volunteers help our children make sense of this world. We haven't been able to do this in a while, but I know that this morning, they would be having tough conversations with our children. They would share the warmth of love, help them to see the light of truth and how to use the energy of action. We had more than 80 children and youth participate in religious exploration program this year. That's over 80 children and youth who might go out into the world living our UU values. That was only possible because of our outstanding religious exploration volunteers. In the past, I've shown gratitude to our RE volunteers by giving them a meaningful token of appreciation. This time, however, with the current state of our world and the mission of RE, I thought that I would make a more meaningful use of the money for volunteer appreciation. I hope you understand my intention with this. Powers and I decided that in the name of all of our volunteers, we would make a donation to Mutual Aid Tompkins County.
Right now, mutual aid is prioritizing the most vulnerable populations, even children in need. So on Tuesday, I'm going to make a post on Facebook about our RE volunteers. If you or your child or youth have a special memory of one of our volunteers, please share it in the comments. Or if you're an RE volunteer and you'd like to share one of your memories, please do. RE volunteers, I am so grateful for all that you've done to support our program, to support me, and especially our children. You're the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. So this morning, we are going to do a blessing of the animals as part of our worship. This is something that we've done in the fall with some other religious communities, but it felt especially important to do it now while we're all home with our animals. So if you have an animal in your house that you want to go and get and bring close to you for this next part of worship, then go ahead and go get them. We're going to take a few moments to bring those animals close to us, or maybe you open the window so you can hear the birds, or even close your eyes so that you can imagine the animals in your life. So let's take a moment to go get our animals and transition. We're going to do a little bit of a switcheroo of camera angles on this end. So it's going to be a little bit like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood over here. So I will see you in a moment. Good. All right, so during this time of sheltering at home and physical distancing, many of us have been spending time with our animals at home. These may be our dogs, our cats, our bunnies, our chickens, our lizards, our turtles. This is my dog Checkers making his Zoom debut in worship. And I'm grateful that we can do this blessing of the animals from our homes because Checkers sometimes has trouble getting along with other dogs. So even though he gets blessed pretty much every day, we're gonna bless him again this morning. So some of these animals that we have are our pets. Some of them are animals we've brought into our families to be part of our circle of love and care as members. And other animals are those that we just choose to notice and journey with. Perhaps you've been watching new baby birds being born, or maybe you've found salamander eggs in the water. You've watched a deer graze, or you've gotten to know the cows at the end of your street during this time. Maybe you're paying a little more attention to the birds that are visiting, the bugs and the bees, the squirrels and the groundhogs. Today, we give thanks for all these animals in our lives and their place in our hearts. We affirm our interconnectedness with all beings and give thanks for them today. I want to share a prayer with you by Reverend Thomas Rhodes. You birds of the air, hawk, sparrow, and laughing jay, you embody freedom itself. Delight us with your song, astound us with feats of migration. Grant us your perspective, for too often our horizon is limited and we are blind to the full results of our actions. You, worms of the earth, ants, beetles, spiders, and centipedes, you are the essential but oft forgotten strand in nature's web. Through you, the cycle is complete. Through you, new life arises from old. Remind us of our humility, for the wheel of life does not turn around us. We are not the axle, but merely spokes, no less than unseen, unknown, and shunned companions such as yourselves. You, creatures of the field and wood and field, marsh, desert, bear, bison, skunk, and squirrel, weasel, and wolf. Too often you have sacrificed your homes in the name of progress, clear-cutting the forests to fill our desire. or covering the earth with tarmac, cement, and suburban lawns. Pray that we may remember that the earth was not given for our needs alone, and what we do to you, we eventually do to ourselves. You animals of the farm, horse and cow, pig and fowl, willingly or not, you give your very lives for us. Your milk for our nourishment, your flesh for our sustenance. Yet too often we forget that the meat on our tables was once alive as we are. Forgive our willful ignorance and remind us constantly to give thanks for your sacrifice. You, dearest companions in our lives, dogs and cats, hamsters and goldfish, you who are with us today, and you who always will be present in our memories. You have enriched our lives in so many ways, endured our shortcomings with calm acceptance, taught us something of our humanity, taught us how to love. May we hold you in our hearts throughout the days of our lives. Amen, and blessed be. So now I invite you to bring your animal close to you or reach your hand toward them and repeat after me. Say the name of your pet. Checkers Marie. May you live a long, happy, and blessed life. May there be food in your belly, a warm place to sleep, and joy in your days. Let us always remember that we are in mutual existence with all other beings. May we always care for others and go now with peace and joy in our hearts for our little furry friends and the animals that bring us joy. Amen, and blessed be.
Good morning. Now is the time for joys and sorrows. But before I give our announcements for joys and sorrows, I want to share with you that if you have a joy or sorrow that you would like to share, please send them to Reverend Margaret at minister@uuithaca.org by 9 o'clock on the Sunday when you would like it shared. Please bear in mind that our service is live streamed when you consider the private nature of your joys and sorrows. In a spirit of reverence, love, and care, we take time now to bear witness to some of the joys and sorrows of our community, to share those events that call for our prayers and support, our praise and celebration. From Norma Helsberg. Norma wants us to know that she is now in hospice and is at the hospice residence on East King Road. You can send her cards to Hospicare 172 East King Road, Ithaca. The Howard Sharif family is celebrating Savannah Sharif's graduation from the Community College of Vermont with an associate's degree in early child education. The graduation ceremony, which would have been next weekend, has been put off for a year, but Savannah's hard-earned accomplishments is no less worthy. She grew up and was nurtured in this community, and Russ and Beth invite you all to share in their pride and joy. For those we are holding in our thoughts, in our hearts, and perhaps in our prayers, let us call these names out loud into this community, into this space of healing and hope right now. We extend loving kindness to all in our world, and let us not forget to extend loving kindness to ourselves today, tomorrow, and beyond, Let our hands be outstretched in kindness, and let us keep showing up for our lives and each other with an open heart, no matter what. Love and courage to us all. Blessed be, and amen.
I invite you to join with me in some continued moments of reflection. This has been another difficult week, one that has tried our spirits and our souls. We've been reminded again of the violent realities of police brutality, the pervasiveness of racism and abuse of power. And this week we have lost more lives to this pandemic. Because we are sheltering in place, we've missed the births of babies and visits with family and graduations and proms and cookouts and church gatherings. It's been a difficult week. This week, I have been trying to pay attention to my breath and give thanks for it. Most of the time, we breathe without thinking about it. But these days, in a worldwide pandemic caused by a respiratory illness, with George Floyd dying because he could not breathe, with the cities burning, with the riots of people who have been held down and used and battered for hundreds of years, it feels important to breathe. And so I share this piece with you that was written by a Black colleague of mine. Reverend Adam Lawrence Dyer serves our Unitarian Universalist congregation in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And this prayer comes from his book of meditations on the Black experience and its intersections with his UU faith. It's called The First Breath. That first breath must be delicious. It must be more tantalizing, more intoxicating than any drug, fragrant like no flower will ever be, enticing like no body scent. It must be all of this and more, yet without words or memories. How do we know? That first glorious rush of air wants us to keep breathing, wants our hearts to keep beating, wants our eyes to open and see, wants our souls to open and say yes. The first breath wants us to live all our life, saying, please, God, let me live. Let me breathe for just one day more until we breathe our very last. So may it be. Amen. And blessed be.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
Each week, we take an offering to sustain the important ministries and programs of this congregation and its presence in Ithaca. This week is a Sharing Sunday, and we will be donating all plate proceeds to Mutual Aid Tompkins. Juliana Garcia will now say a few words about this program.
Hi, all. Juliana Garcia here. I am very thankful to everyone who has reached out to me within the last couple months and has also offered aid in our community. One thing that I wanted to note about mutual aid is it's all of us. Like, mutual aid is really all of us, right? And we do it in our everyday lives. And I think especially in this community that we're in with FUSIT. So yeah, a little bit about like the more formal aspect of it is that we're reaching out to our neighbors in need, and we're helping people get their groceries, right? Get their medicine, get supplies, anything else they may need. And our focus is really on the most vulnerable people in our community and those who have been historically marginalized. So like the sick, the elderly, disabled, undocumented, single parents, queer, Black, Indigenous, and or people of color, those with limited pay, those without work. And so we've had a lot of discussions with existing organizations who have been doing this work forever, right? Because mutual aid isn't new, right? This like formal like entity, right, that's called Mutual Aid Tompkins is a newer thing, but the Black and brown communities and leaders in our community have been doing mutual aid forever. So yeah, just remembering to keep those voices centered. So a little bit about it, any money that is donated, we are offering up to $150 to people per month. And that's no questions asked. So people, can just say they need it and they don't have to like fill out forms or go through a whole rigmarole or show need, right? We very much believe that people like are able to express their own needs and know their own needs. So yeah, there's money that goes to that. Also the food sharing cabinets. I don't know if you've seen them around town. But there are these little blue cabinets and they're open 24/7. People have them on their front lawn and things like that. So yeah, it's just a variety of things. If anyone wants to talk to me more about it, that would be great. And if you want to get more involved, a really easy way is our neighborhood stewards that we're doing, which is basically reaching out to people in your immediate proximity, right? Like your neighborhood, your block, and just checking on people. So we have information on our website, mutualaidtompkins.com, of like best practices because we are in a pandemic, right? So we don't want people like knocking on each other's doors and getting other people sick. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get involved, but you don't even have to get involved in the formal organization, right? It's really just looking out for your neighbors during this time. So yeah, thank you.
Our reading this morning are words by my colleague, Reverend Elizabeth Wen. Spirit, I would really rather not learn this. I didn't think I needed to. I thought someone else could do it, thought a leader was coming to do it, thought the young people could do it, or the elders could do it, or the professionals. Or I don't want to learn it because it means letting go of something I hold dear. Letting go of being someone who knows the answers. Letting go of being someone who doesn't know. Letting go of the way I see the world. Letting go of how I might need to change. Letting go of certainty, of logic, of facts, of control. Of the myth that you can live on this earth and not harm. or the myth that I can't learn anything new. Help me to learn it, please. And then help me to live the life that I have learned and do right by the gift of being taught. When I was young, I spent a lot of time in the garden. Now, to be clear, this wasn't by choice. My parents had lots of gardens in their yard, and one of my chores was to help mulch or weed or water whatever needed to be done. So I spent a lot of time in the garden weeding. Now, for anyone who's weeded, you know that you have to get real close to the ground. You got to pull just so, or maybe twist to get the whole weed out with its root. It would be easy to just go quickly and pull the tops off the weeds, you know, the parts you can't see, and make it look like the job is done. I tried this a few times in my childhood, didn't go over well, because really to get at the weeds, you got to get at the roots. And sometimes there are those weeds, you know, the ones I'm talking about, the ones that seem to multiply and they run under the soil. They have these long tendrils of green strong enough to run under the rocks and around the bushes everywhere. Those are the weeds you really have to dig for. Follow their growing patterns, get them all up. You got to reach down into the earth and grab, pull with your strength to get them to release and come up to the surface. And just when you think you've gotten them all, you find another clump of green growth that is threatening to take over the entire garden. Racism is like that. Racism is like the weeds. So often we try to deal with the parts that we can see, the parts above the surface. So often we let our work break off at the root, or we don't even bother to reach or to dig far enough into the soil to get to the roots and bring them to light. We don't bother to get dirty. We don't bother to get curious and deep into the inner workings. We just skim over the top. Racism is like the weeds. Sometimes we even cover it all up with mulch or stones, hoping that it'll all just go away and we won't have to deal with it. Hoping that we can get a fresh slate, arguing, well, it wasn't me who set up this whole racist world in motion. Why do I have to deal with it? Because we do. Because like the weeds in my garden, racism is here, sometimes right out in the open, and sometimes more often than not, burrowing under the surface, building strength and threatening the whole thing, popping out when we don't expect it. And who is this we that I'm talking about? We is people who look like me. We are the ones who have to get dirty, who have to reach down, have to get curious, have to reach further than we think we do, and spend some time with the parts that are rooted real far down. Because this is a problem for white people to deal with. Racism is not a problem that needs to be solved by our Black, Indigenous, people of color neighbors and friends and leaders. Racism needs to be dealt with by those who have created it, by those people who, my white friends, are us. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Tony McDade. These are the names of 4 more people killed because of the amount of melanin in their skin. They died because of the rampant racism that lives in and through our society. Their names are added to a list of countless others who have died because of racism, of inequality, of inequity, of the hatred that has been baked into this country since its founding and is upheld by racist policies and practices. We know these things. We know that our country was founded on racism and hatred and the enslavement of entire races of people. We've studied it in school and we've read about it, and still it persists. In this country, we have been told that the civil rights movement was the flip of a switch that we needed to move forward. We've bought into the fallacy that hundreds of years of oppression and abuse can be wiped away by policy and law. We've bought into the fallacy that what matters most is a person's character and how they carry themselves in the world. And by doing so, we have ignored the power of hundreds of years of oppression and abuse of power and the ways that discrimination is rooted into our foundations. These realities mean that in many ways, it doesn't matter at all what the individual does or does not do. We all fall victim to the systems that have created and upheld the racist society in which we live. The problem is us, and the problem is bigger than us all at the same time. My heart hurts this week. My chest feels heavy. We're experiencing this worldwide pandemic. It's disproportionately impacting Black and Brown people, people who are vulnerable, people on the margins. And we're seeing even more illustrations of the ways that racism continues to perpetuate itself and permeate our lives. I don't want to have to learn this. I don't want to have to teach our children about this. To echo the words from my colleague, Reverend Elizabeth, when I thought somebody else could do it. But we are who we've got. We are, as it has been said, the ones we have been waiting for. And it's going to take some hard work, getting some dirt under our fingernails and digging deep beneath the surface. It's going to take reaching deeper than the surface level. It's going to take holding on until we really grasp the root and pulling together to get it out. It's going to take the conscious effort and energy and commitment of learning why things are the way they are. What that means for me, what it means for you, what it means for us as people of faith and intention, what it means for all of us. As Unitarian Universalists, we have made a promise to one another to be the best version of ourselves. And this means we must embark on a lifelong journey of learning about this world, about our place in it, about the places where we hold power and the places where we abuse it. We hold close a value for a lifelong search for truth and meaning, and that includes asking deep questions about why the world is how it is, and not just accepting it as such. At First Unitarian Society of Ithaca, we have proclaimed that Black Lives Matter. We have hung multiple banners on our buildings saying those words to the greater Ithaca community. And now we are tasked more than ever to live into that belief. We are tasked with doing the work, with getting our hands dirty and having hard conversations. We're tasked not with saying that we are building the beloved community, but tasked with living into the beloved community, one with justice and equity at its core. Next month, we will gather virtually with thousands of other Unitarian Universalists for our annual General Assembly. And ahead of that, some of our congregations are voting to add an 8th principle to our current list of 7 principles. Now, currently, we as UUs hold 7 principles in our relational covenant with one another and between our congregations. And this 8th principle, which was developed and created by people of color within Unitarian Universalism, would affirm our deep belief in justice and dismantling oppression. This is the words for it. It reads, "We affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions." I'll say that again. We affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. This principle calls to us to be active dismantlers of the systems of oppression in ourselves, in our congregations, in society at large. I affirm this principle. I would love to see it added to our existing 7. I invite you to consider it as an 8th principle as well. And perhaps we as a congregation can consider voting to add it to our current list of 7 principles. But beyond adopting a principle, how do we go about living that principle in our lives? What does that look like? We listen to the voices and experiences of Black and Brown people. We educate ourselves on history, on our own biases, on the surprising ways that racism and oppression show up in our society, in ourselves, in our congregation, in our community. We give space to people historically on the margins to mourn and protest and react in the way they see fit. And we amplify the words of people who have been most deeply impacted by our racist practices and policies. So often these voices have been silenced. And one thing I can do with my privilege as a white person is to amplify the voices from people of color who are speaking to this moment in our collective experience. There have been many pieces written this week in reaction to these experiences we're having. And even before all of this has happened in the last week or so, many of my friends and colleagues of color have written pieces that have touched me deeply. There have been poems and articles and books that are inspiring me and, more importantly, challenging me in my own racist ideas and practices. Perhaps one of the most influential pieces I've read this week was written by a friend and colleague named Kenny Wiley. Kenny is a former editor of our UU World magazine, and he spent some time at Harvard Divinity School when I was at seminary at Andover Newton Theological School. And now he lives in Texas. He is a Black man, and he writes for The Eagle, which is a newspaper in Bryan, Texas. In the wake of this week's events, Kenny wrote this. I suppose I should start by saying that nothing particularly racist has ever happened to me, overtly at least. I think it's important to be clear about that. Compared to what so many of my Black and brown siblings go through, I've had it pretty good. All I really wanted to say tonight about this: George Floyd, dead, killed, in Minneapolis, from Houston. I can't breathe. Officer takes a knee and a life. Christian Cooper, Central Park, New York City, on Twitter all day. Oh, he went to Harvard and wrote for Marvel and was just so nice, and he's good looking and loves birds, and how could Amy Cooper feel threatened by him? All I really wanted to say tonight about this, if anything ever happens to me, I don't think it will. I'm a journalist and I smile and head nod a lot when I'm out on my bike, and I love quoting Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and West Wing and sending goofy Thanos gifts. And I mean, come on, I work for a newspaper and was head greeter at my church back in those days when we could greet people at church. But just in case, if it does, you might be tempted to make me better than I am. To tell them about my Eagle articles, that I love women's basketball, that I'm under 50 and read the New York Times and Houston Chronicle most days. Oh, and Ultimate Frisbee. You can tell them those things if you like. But they'll find other things, worse things. There are always other things. Like I said, statistically, I'm pretty sure I'll be just fine, but just in case, you could say, Black lives don't just matter if they're polite or smile a lot, or like Friday Night Lights and went to Mizzou, or if they're Harvard grads who wrote for Marvel and who love birds. I'm a journalist now, and I try not to editorialize anymore, but if only for one night, here goes. George Floyd should be alive. Ahmaud Arbery should be alive. Sandra Bland and Rakia Boyd should be alive. I heard Brian Stevenson say in June 2017 in New Orleans, something he said dozens of times before and since: each of us is more than the worst thing we have ever done. I think about that quote all the time, Kenny says, and sometimes I'm not even sure why. I know it changed my life theologically. I think maybe because more than anything else I know, it's that I believe that so often we badly want a world of saints and sinners, angels and non-angels. And what Stevenson gets, I think, is that nearly all the time, it's not that simple. We, all of us, we make people smile and we hurt people deeply. We show up for our friends and we steal things. We save lives and we break hearts and laws. We sin and we save. We do unforgivable things. We commit unbelievable good. We live. And we are more than any one thing, any one moment, any one triumph, any one mistake. And we all deserve to live. Indeed, Kenny, we all deserve to live. We all deserve to breathe. We all deserve to eat and rest and heal, and not only survive, but thrive. May we continue to do our part, to dig deep, to stay present with what we find. May we not let our work break off at the root. May we utilize our privilege for good and for transformation. May we live our principles through our actions and our deeds. May we remain curious about the world and our place in it, for that is what brings richness to our lives. We may not want to have to learn this, but we are indeed the ones we've been waiting for. So may it be. Amen. And blessed be.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat.
As we continue into yet another week that will challenge our hearts, our minds, our very sense of being, I wish for you moments of wonder, of joy, and of learning about this big world in which we live. May you dig deep. May you remain curious. May you feel held and loved. And above all, may you continue to have hope. We extinguish this chalice, but not the hope, love, and courage that it represents. We carry our love and our courage out into this beautiful and broken world. Our service is now ended. Let our true service now begin. Go in peace.